Oh, I realized the clock here is slow. It's like 20. All right, so it's 35. Let's get started. Welcome to the third lecture. Today we're going to learn about UIKit and Autolayout. So the first two lectures, we've been learning about Swift. In this lecture, we'll actually be building an app, so hopefully you're excited for that. Yes, so before we get started, I just wanted to cover some of the logistics. This is going to be the final time I remind you guys, because I know I've reminded you like literally every lecture, but please do sign up for the right section on CMS. Sorry, not CMS, Student Center. It's section 601. We had issues before where like students have signed up for the wrong one, and it's been a nightmare to switch them over. So just double check that, and that'll be great. And also make sure that you've joined Ed and CMS, because Ed is where we're going to be giving out like announcements, and this is also where you can ask us questions if you have any. And CMS is going to be where you're submitting your assignments as well as receiving graded feedback. So just make sure that you have that. And if you're not in any of those, you can like come up to us at the end of lecture and we can add you in. Okay, cool. And so for the resources, like the slides I'm using right now, the code that I'll be typing up later in the demo, and just anything else that we use during lecture will all be posted to the course textbook. So the link for that is iOS-courses.Cornell AppDev. Hopefully you've seen this already. And yeah, so we'll post them at the end of lecture, but sometimes these videos take a while to load and upload, so give us like around a day or so. Okay, cool. And for grading, I just want to quickly touch on this. So we've received some questions about like when assignments are due. So apart from this week, because of break, all assignments will be due on Monday, and every project you'll have 2 slip days. You can feel free to use that. But after that, we won't be accepting submissions, so please do get it in on time. And if for any reason you need a extension, you can feel free to request one, but please make sure that you request it 24 hours in advance and make a private post on Ed saying why, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Okay? Cool. And if any other questions about grading or about projects, there's a FAQ section on the course textbook. You can have a look at that. Okay?
And since we're telling you about the 24 hours now, you can ask for extensions for P1 after lecture if you need to as well.
Sure. Okay, cool. So, right, let's get to the Kahoot review. All right, so you can enjoy this. And I'm not sure if you have seen the Ed post, but we'll be giving extra credit for the Kahoot. Actually, extra credit for the Kahoot, and like top scoring net IDs. At the end of the semester, we'll be getting a small prize. We haven't decided on what that will be, but you can look forward to that. Yes. So, Caitlin, make sure you sign in with your net ID so we know, like, when we actually like download it and stuff, we know who you are. So, I'm gonna remove this, Caitlin, but make sure you join again with your net ID. Okay.
You have to color out like that.
Oh, oops. All right, looking like it's plateaued. Is anybody still trying to join? All right, let's get started. Oh, do I need to plug in the sound?
It's not that important.
Okay. I know we can sing.
No.
All right, so first question. If task is a struct, what will the following print? And while you guys answer that, I'll try to look for the sound.
I think it might.
Oh, there's a plug here. Okay, nice. So remember the difference between reference type and value type, right? So quick show of hands, what is task? What is a struct? Is that a value type or is it a reference type? Yes, Cornell? Nice, very good, right? So when we create when we basically do task of B is equal to task.A, we're creating a copy here, right? And so when we update the copy, nothing actually really changes, right? Cool. Next one, move my face. All right, good job, ZG268. Now, what if we change task to a class? Who's the plug? Okay. Ooh, okay. So let's explain this, right? So again, right, the difference between a value type and reference type. So just now we talked about value type, right? A struct. So when we do, for example, task B here is equal to another task, task A here, we're creating a copy, like in the last question. But in this question, since task is a class, when we're doing this, task B is pointing to the same class that type A is pointing to, right? So when we change the title of task B, we're also changing the title of task A because they're both pointing to the same task, right? So then when we print task A and task B, both of the titles have been changed to buy food, and that's when we print it, we get buy food and buy food, okay? Cool. And ooh, RS929 has taken the lead, very nice. Now what does this, the following print? So this is about optionals. So this is the end of the lecture 1, and we also touched a bit of this on lecture 2. Ooh, okay. So let me explain this. So this was actually a little bit of a trick question. So we see over here A, right? We use int and a question mark. That means the variable A is an int optional, right? Remember this question mark notation? So we are able to set it to nil. That's no problem, right? But over here, notice, right? B is not an optional. B is just an int. So what this line over here is saying, I'm trying to assign an int optional to something that is just an int. There are two things of different types. That's not going to work, right? If you want to do something like that, you need to first unwrap A, get the int out, and then assign that integer to an integer, okay? So the takeaway from this question is int optionals and ints are not the same. So that's why this line does not compile, and that's why it prints nothing, because it doesn't compile, okay? Cool. Okay, looks like the leaderboard didn't change. All right, 2 more questions. What was the following evaluate to? Okay, cool, very nice. Looks like most people got this. But since a few people didn't, let me just quickly explain this, right? So this here we have an enum, right? We have like a bunch of cases. And what's happening here is basically when I call emojify on what I pass in here, right? I'm basically matching it to the case that it matches to, right? So if you've done Java or I think Python also has like switch cases, right? What you basically do is you just go down line by line and see where this term kind of appears, right? So over here we have sleep. Sleep is not in the first case, but is the second case. So the first one would be the sleep emoji here, right? So that's the first one. The second one, we look at homework, right? So homework is not eat, homework is not nap nor sleep, and homework is definitely not code. So in this case, none of them, we don't hit any of them. That's why we return the default case, which is this emoji here, okay? So that's why it's this one. Nice, CZ375. And this is the final question. Is this too small? I can zoom in a bit. Oh, actually, it makes it small if I do this. Yikes. You do this, but then you can't see the options. Okay. Yeah, this is my bad. I'll make a bigger image next time. But yes. So, yeah, this is my bad. But the point of this question is that when we have this tuple over here, what we can do is we can also, like, not only can we index by like the key we assign here, so like first name, last name, Aquaman, we can also index by like doing the integer directly. So over here, if we do .1, we're basically getting this value, the second value over here, right, which returns pickles. So if I did .0, that will return Noah. If I did .2, that will return true. Okay. All right, nice. So that's the end of the Kahoot review. And in third place, we have YH826. This is a bit underwhelming when there are no people names, but yeah, because the net IDs are better indicators. So, yeah. All right, congratulations, CZ375. Good job. And also good job to the runner-ups. So let's get back to the lecture for today. All right. So today we're going to be learning about UIKit. Here, okay. So what is UIKit? UIKit is a framework that Apple basically made for you, and it provides us with what we call core objects, and we use them to basically make iOS apps. So let's break this down, what this means. A framework you can think of as basically a bunch of ready-made components that is provided for you, so you don't have to think about like lower level details. So I can give you an example. Say last time you logged into like Instagram, Facebook, or Messenger, or like whatever you use, right? When you click on the ID or like the login to type something on your phone, the keyboard pops up, right? And then you type something and you press enter and the keyboard goes back down. So like if you had to program that by yourself or from scratch, you would have to like deal with the keyboard, bring out the keyboard, put back the keyboard, and that's a lot of like a very hairy detail. But UIKit provides you this component called UI text field, and you can just use it directly, and you don't have to think about the keyboard at all. So that's what we call a ready-made component, right? Because it deals with the low-level details, and a framework is just a collection of these components, okay? So that's UIKit, and it provides us these core objects. So what are core objects? We have two main of these core objects. We have a view controller, and we have a view, okay? So we can think about a view controller as like a screen on your app, okay? So, like when you put out, say, for example, Spotify, right? You have your home screen, and then you can go to like the settings screen, and then you can go to like search for a song screen, right? Like when you click on the tab on the bottom, it brings a new screen. So that's what a view controller does, okay? That's like a way you can think about it. And in this view controller, you put a bunch of subviews, right? And the view controller is like in charge of maintaining what goes where, what goes on top of what, and stuff like that, okay? And finally, every app has at least one of these view controllers, because like you need to fill the entire screen of the app, right? You've never seen an app which like half filled the screen and just like the other half just like shows your home screen, right? That doesn't happen. So you have at least one of these view controllers that fill your entire screen, and that is called the root view controller, okay? Now, so we talked about view controllers, now let's talk about views. So views are basically the thing that basically populates your screen, right? So like the buttons, the text fields, all like the other small components that you see on your screen. And like these are like the formal names of them. We have UI image view, UI button, UI label, UI text field, and there's a bunch more. We'll go into more detail later. And these are all subclasses of UI view, right? They're a view, okay? So here's a quick example. So this, say like this, I actually forgot what app this is, but basically this is like a home screen of some, or like a screen of some app, right? So this entire screen would be in one view controller, and on this view controller we would have a bunch of smaller views, right? So UI label is a small view, UI image here, so saying like the background backdrop there, if you see. I'm not sure it's very clear, but like this darkened photo, that's a UI image view, right, with a bit of shade on top. And this button, right, the add to calendar button, which you click on, which adds it to your calendar, hopefully, is a UI button. And finally, this description on the bottom is a UI text view, okay? So just a small detail here. Notice how we have like bars express that like has text in it, right, up top. That's a UI label. And we also have this long description on the bottom. That's a UI text view. But both of them are just displaying text. So why do I need two things doing the same, like two components that do the same thing? A good thing to remember is that we use UI labels for just like a few words or like one line of text, right? It's just like something that's pretty short and like succinct that we put on the screen. Whereas if we have like multi-line to multi-paragraph text, we would use a UI text view. Okay, that's just like a small note to keep in mind. So we learned about like the different views we have. Now we want to know how we're going to position them on the screen. And in order to do that, we use Autolayout. Okay? So Autolayout is a way of positioning views relative to the screen as well as other views we have. Okay? And so a very, very key word I want to stress here is the word relative. So Autolayout is like one way of laying out things on your screen or in your app. Another approach is what we call a frame-based layout, and that's not what we're teaching today, or at all in this course. And that's because relative is usually a lot better, and I'll explain why. So in a frame-based approach, for example, say I want to have like a button on the screen, then I would have to set its x-axis, its y-axis, its width, its height. But remember that, you know, like Apple has been around for a long time, and they have a lot of different phones. They have different, and these different phones have different sizes, right? So if you compare like an iPhone SE with like an iPhone 13 Pro Max Giga, whatever that one's called, they're different, right? And so if you have a button that's like a certain width and height on one smaller phone, it could fill out the entire phone screen, whereas on another phone, it's like a lot smaller, right? So to have a more unified user experience, to have a more responsive app, we want to lay out things relative. And so when we use auto layout, we would, like, for example, if I were to describe it, it would be like, I want my app, or I want this button to be like half of the height of the screen and half of the width of the screen, right? Then that would be the same across all devices. So that's why we want to use auto layout, because it stresses the point of having things relative, okay? And so how do we use auto layout, right? There are two main things to keep in mind. First are anchors, right? Every view has a set of anchors, and I'll show you later. And then after we have anchors, we want to constrain the anchors, okay? So anchors and constraints. Those are the two main points. So first about anchors. So these are a list of anchors, right? I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll show you quickly in an example. So here is a UI button, for example, and it has a top anchor, a bottom anchor, a height anchor, a width anchor, a center X, center Y anchor, a trailing and leading anchor, okay? And okay, I'm just going to go back to the slide before. These are like all the anchors as well, right? So I think this is more visual, so I think this is better for everyone. But if you want to have a full list, you can go to the previous slide, okay? So notice how I mentioned like I have a left and right anchor, but I also have a trailing and leading anchor. So this is a small like quirk with the way like these anchors kind of work. So in most countries, actually, the trailing and leading anchor are the same, right? Because in countries where the text goes from left to right, from left to right, it's the same. But notice that in some other countries, the text goes from right to left, right? In that scenario, then the leading anchor would actually be on the right-hand side, and the trailing anchor would be on the left-hand side. So just to be more like inclusive and considering all use cases, we usually use leading and trailing anchor instead of left and right anchor, okay? Cool. So that was just now for a UI view. The exact same applies for UI view controllers. Okay, view controllers also have the exact set of anchors, and they refer to basically the same thing, right? So like the top of the view controller is the top anchor, the bottom is the bottom anchor, the leading and the trailing anchors are just like the leading and trailing anchor of the entire view controller, okay? And notice how, remember at the beginning I mentioned how like you have at least one view controller that fills the entire screen, right? In this scenario, the view controller does fill the entire screen, so the top and bottom anchor are basically the top and bottom of your phone, right? The leading anchor and trailing anchor are basically the left and right of your phone, okay? Cool. And so, like in this view controller, again, right, it's mapping out some of the UI view, the components laying out on the screen. So that's, see the Dove album cover, that's a UI image view. This song title, that's a UI label. And the play pause button, right, that's a UI button, okay? Okay, so we talked about anchors. They like define the bounds, basically, of the thing you're trying to lay out, of the view, right? Now, in order to actually specify what goes where, we need to use what we call constraints. And constraints are basically a set of rules that tell you, well, I want this anchor to be however many spaces away from another anchor. Okay, that's like layman terms of what it basically means. So here we look at a quick example, right? So pulling back the Spotify example we had from just now, right? Say I want this song title, so this is the song title. I want it to be however many pixels away from the bottom of the album cover, right? So how we would do that, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so this was the example I gave just now. So how like we want to think about constraints. It's basically where I want to place one anchor relative to another anchor. Okay, so that's how we would think about it. Say if I were to lay out this UI label here, which is the song name, okay? And before we actually dive into another example, I want to mention a important special case here. So with the new iPhones, and like by new, it's actually not that new, like iPhone XR, I think, is the first phone to have a notch, or it's like the head bar. So it's like this thing up top, right? You see there's a little dent up top. And it's important to consider that when you're building an app, because say you want something to be on the top of the screen, or like a little bit away from the top of the screen, right? And then you try to use, well, okay, so I want to use the top anchor, right? Because I want to place something relative to the top of the view. That's not going to work for all phones because of the notch, right? So if you try to place something on the top and have a notch, it's just going to like not appear because it's under the notch. So a way we work around that, Apple has provided you what we call the Safe Area Layout Guide. So in basically what the Safe Area Layout Guide is, it basically does exactly what you expect, right? It basically provides the parts of the screen which is safe for you to place things. So the Safe Area Layout Guide, oh, I need to move my face. Bye-bye. So the Safe Area Layout Guide.top anchor is basically right under the notch. And the Safe Area Layout Guide.bottom anchor is right above this little pill on the bottom. So I'm not sure if you've like tried using that before. You can't actually touch the screen or the app if it's behind the pill, because the pill is like used for multitasking. So you actually also need to use Safe Area Layout Guide.bottom anchor if you're referring to the very, very bottom of the phone. Okay? So that's just a quick quirk to mention. All right, so actually, before we dive into the example, does anybody have any questions about, yes?
Earlier you said there was the difference between UI and UI text. You briefly mentioned that the difference is that UI labels are just for like short, concise ones, and UI text is for like longer paragraphs. But like, would there be like actual trouble when using UI label for UI text, or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the question was basically, if I use UI label for like longer text, or say I use UI text view for shorter text, right, vice versa, would that cause you issues? The answer is no. You can set a bunch of properties on the UI label. So for example, there's this property called like multi-line something, I forgot. But basically, you basically need to set a lot more properties in order to allow UI label to display multi-line text, right? Another issue is that with the UI text view, right? Say if you specify like the size on the screen, right? And say your text kind of goes out, like it's a lot more than just the UI text view can display. UI text view is very smart. It basically provides you like a scroll bar that automatically handles like this text that kind of flows out. But if you use a UI label, then none of that is given to you. You need to program it yourself, right? So that's why, and this is the whole point of like having ready-made components, right? They're helpful for like a particular use case, so you use the one that's right for your use case. So that's the whole point of that. Okay, good question. Cool. All right, let me skip to the relevant section. Okay, so let's go through a quick example of how we do constraints, and then after that, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do a quick crash course on how you want to set up an XCode project, and let's run through a quick example. Okay. So here's the constraint, right? So say view 1, this blue square, is already on my phone. It's there. It's done, right? And now I want to place this green square, view 2, somewhere relative to view 1. And so this somewhere is defined here. I want the top of my view 2 to be 20 pixels away from the bottom of my view 1. So how do I write this using anchors and constraints? So the way I do it is first I get the anchor of the view I want to place on the screen, right? So in this case, it's view 2. So I get view 2's top anchor, and then I constrain it, right? I constrain it to basically the bottom anchor of view 1, right? That's exactly what I said in English here, right? I want to have view 2 be 20 pixels away from view 1's bottom edge. So over here, I get view 2's top anchor. I constrain it to the bottom anchor of view 1, right? And so what am I missing here? I'm missing the 20 pixel part, right? So if I ignore this right now, the bottom of view 2 will basically stick to the top of view 2 will stick to the bottom of view 1. So if I put the constant here, this is basically the offset, and it tells me to basically, okay, stick it there, but move it down by 20. Okay, so this is how you would write it using constraints and anchors. And so one important thing to note, this constant offset, it can be negative, right? So when I'm specifying a positive constant, when I'm specifying like top and bottom anchors, a positive value means I'm going down. A negative value means I'm going up, right? If I'm doing like left and right constraints, then a positive value means I'm going right, and a negative value means I'm going left. Okay? That feels pretty natural, right? Like going down is a bigger value, going right is also a bigger value. Okay? Cool. And another example, but this is the same, of say I want to constrain the view now, not to another view, but with respect to the screen this time, right? And so over here, a mistake would be to just use like the say like root view controller.top anchor, right? Because if I do that, then I might not account for the notch. So if I want to account for the notch, then I use safe area layout guide, and I constrain it 20 pixels away from the top. Oh, I need to move my face again. Wait, this is not a good space to put it. I'll move it to the side. Okay, here. So in this example, right, I want to constrain my view 1 to be 20 pixels away from the top of the screen. So I do, again, view 1, right, the view I'm trying to place. It's top anchor, I constrain it to be the safe area layout guide's top anchor, but offset it by 20. Okay, remember, positive values move you down. Cool. All right, so yeah, do you have a question?
Can we use storyboard for all these constraints and stuff?
That's a very, very good question. So quick answer, yes, you can. But in this course, we chose not to teach storyboard. And the reason why is because when you're working by yourself, it's fine. You just drag and drop. And it's actually really quick, right? I actually did use storyboard at the beginning. But when you work with multiple people, right, then it becomes a little bit annoying because say like I want this screen to look a specific way, and then I push it to GitHub, right? Let's say I'm working with someone else using GitHub, and they pull it and they move it a little bit by accident, right? Then you're going to get a bunch of merge conflicts. And like what you really did is you moved like a view like 1 pixel to the left, right? If you had that in like a programmatic layout, you would instantly see it because you constrain things by discrete values. Whereas when you use a storyboard, the entire storyboard file is very convoluted and it can give you a lot of troubles. So that's one main reason why we choose to use programmatic layouts. And another reason is also because like industry also uses programmatic layouts because they work across a lot of different people. So we think it's more important to prepare you using programmatic layouts as opposed to using storyboard.
What storyboards are? Can you explain what storyboards are?
Oh, yes, sorry. For those of you who don't know what a storyboard is, let me just give you a quick example on Google. But so it's basically a way for you to specify things on the screen. But instead of using programmatic layouts, you just drag and drop. So this is a good example, right? So over here, you're specifying your screen just by literally clicking a new screen, and you drag and drop and you place things on the screen, right? And so like the reason, it's very convenient, but it's only good if it's like you're working by yourself, right? When you're working with more people, or if you maybe want to make a career out of iOS development, then it's very important to learn about programmatic layouts, okay?
It can also be kind of gross to do specific things that are just significantly easier if you're doing it programmatically. So.
All right, so, okay, so let's ignore this for now. This is what we're gonna be building today in the demo. All right, so if you guys don't know, this is Jeff Bezos, and this is his bio. All right, so you can click follow and whatever, but it doesn't really do anything. And there's also like a comment part where you can type stuff. Okay, cool. So let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to launch XCode. Right, I have Spotlight that just does Command Tab, and I can launch XCode, and give it a bit of time. So we want to create a new XCode project here. Oh, and just by the way, this entire lecture is being recorded. So if at any point like you're confused, you can feel free to like watch the lecture, watch the recording of the lecture to like go back to the part you were confused about. And the setup stuff of what I'm showing you right now can get a little confusing if it's the first time you're doing it. So we actually have a section on our textbook called Setting Up a New XCode Project. And that basically does everything what I'm doing right now. So if you prefer to read, this is your go-to source. If you prefer to watch, then you can watch what I'm doing right now.
One thing I will add to that is if you're using an older version of Xcode, could you go back actually?
Oh yeah, sure.
You'll have to edit the plist. Could you scroll down to that part? Which is kind of scary. But if you're running the newest version of Xcode, you won't have to worry about it. But if you are running those, I suggest coming to office hours just so you can bang it out. So. Because you will be creating a bunch of projects, so it'll be really helpful if you could do it by yourself. You got it.
All right, cool. So let's get started. So first thing you want to do is you want to create a new project. Click on this, and you get prompted with like a bunch of things to pick from. So we're building an app, so we're going to click on the app.
Specify that's iOS, not multi-platform.
Yes. And yeah, we're doing iOS, so not multi-platform. So we click next. And then now we're going to give it a name, so this doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call it L3. This is lecture 3. And make sure that you pick storyboard here. And I know that we're not going to use storyboard, we're just going to delete it later, but you don't want Swift UI here. And over here, you want to click Swift, not Objective-C, because that's gross. All right, then we'll click next. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop, because it doesn't matter. But you can, like, if you want to have like a folder where you put all your iOS projects, you can make a folder and put it there. Yes, you have a question? Yeah, he's gonna come help you. But yeah, so so I'm gonna keep going. So remember how we said we don't want to use storyboard, right? So in order to set up your project, there's actually a few things you need to do before you can even start developing. And so I'm going to show you this right now. So the first thing you want to do is you want to remove the storyboard. So this is the thing I clicked on just now. That's called main. That's the storyboard that people would use if they were to actually like build an app using storyboard. But we're not using storyboard. So we're going to right click on that and we're going to click delete. Okay, and we click move to trash. And so we remove the storyboard. Now, even though the storyboard is deleted, there's still some references in the project that kind of like refer to the storyboard. So we need to remove that as well. So one way of doing it is going like click on build settings and then like finding the specific file that has main referred to it. But I'm going to teach you a quick trick, right? Using Xcode, you can like directly find a certain like keyword in your project by pressing Command, Shift, and then F. If you do Command, Shift, and F, this thing on the side pops up, right? And it says find text and it says containing. So we're going to type in main here and press enter. And that's going to bring up all the places where main has been referred to. I'm going to make this bigger actually. I don't think people can see. Ooh, okay. So unfortunately, if it's not the editor, I can't make it any bigger, but this is recorded. So it's actually big enough. Can everybody see? Okay, perfect, cool. So where is main referred to, right? We click on here and we see that it brings us to build settings. And this is exactly where actually the main is being referred to. And so this is the line. So under build settings, info.plist value, and then UIKit main storyboard file. This is the thing you want to delete, right? So if you open it, there's actually two things. You don't want any of them. So we just click this big one and you press delete. And it's gone, okay? The next thing you want to remove, and this is the final thing you need to remove, you go to here, right? So if you did the Command Shift F trick I showed you, you can just click on it directly here. But for those who don't want to do that, you can like if you click on the side, you click Info, and then go like you open all the way down and it says storyboard.name. Sorry, storyboard space name. You click minus here, and it gets deleted. Okay, that's all you need to remove, and then you're done. So now I can save, and I can launch my app. And if it doesn't crash, then we're good. So build succeeded, great. And so on the side is, so this will move. Okay, I want to move my face. And it should give us a black screen. Just give it a moment. So the first time you run it, it could take a while. Oh, and sorry, I didn't explain how I ran it. So after you delete everything, you click on this triangle, rightward facing triangle. That's run, right? So it builds your project, and then it runs it, and it basically pops up a simulator, okay? So I'm using iPhone 13 because I'm used to using that, but you can pick your favorite simulator on the side. That's some type of iPhone. I have a lot less simulators than you would have. You would probably have like a lot because I deleted a bunch that I don't use. You can do that because it saves some space on your computer. but you don't have to do that now. Just like pick some simulator, and that should be fine. Okay. All right. So I'll give you guys a quick moment for your app to build, and while I wait, I'm just gonna. So there's another command that you can use to run. You can press Command R, and that basically runs the entire project. And that's the exact same as clicking this. Okay. Cool. So I'll give you guys 1 minute just to hopefully get to this part, and I'm going to move to this part here. And if you have any issues, feel free to raise your hand, and Noah's going to come and help you fix, hopefully debug it. Okay, so let's keep going. So right now, our app builds and runs. Great, right? But we have nothing. So that's not good. So let's get a screen to appear first, okay? So remember we talked about view controllers, right? So when you follow the steps I gave you, that I showed you, XCode provides you with a default view controller. That's going to be your root view controller, right? So I'm just gonna like make its background color like pink, so I can actually see it. So later on, when I like display it, you actually know that I'm displaying this view controller as opposed to nothing, right? So that's that. And if I click run right now, nothing should appear. Nothing should appear. By nothing, I mean just a black screen, right? And this is correct because I haven't told my project to display that screen. Okay. So now this set of steps is what you need to do to actually display that screen. Okay. So hopefully most people here don't have the like very, very old version of XCode, but if you do, then you might not have the scene delegate here. If you don't, raise your hand, Noah can come help you, but I'm just gonna assume you do because most people do. And if you need help later on after lecture, there is a section that that says like if you don't have scene delegate, it's somewhere here, but if you don't have scene delegate, there's a set of steps for you to follow here, okay? For the people who do have this file, click on scene delegate, and then we're gonna start kind of telling Xcode how to display the screen, okay? So over here, the first thing we do is we need to basically get our Windows scene, okay? So like when I first did this, I was very confused. Like what is a scene? What is a window? Nobody ever told me. So I'm gonna quickly like explain what they are, but you don't need to know this, okay? This is like far beyond the scope of this this lecture. But basically, when we look at like an iPad app here, right? On the phone, an app is an app, right? That's fine. But on the iPad, you could have multiple apps, right? And you could have like half of an app on the left side, half of an app on the right side, right? So something like this. And that gets quite annoying. So the way Apple kind of went around that is they added another layer, and they have what we call a window scene. And in a window scene, you put a bunch of windows, and in the windows, you put your app, like you put your view controller, your views, and stuff like that. So because we're developing for an iPhone, we don't actually need to care about a lot of this detail. So we just basically say one UI window scene, one window, and we just start building inside that, okay? So that's what we're doing right now. So the window scene, if we go back to this image, is like this big box outside. Since we're on the iPhone, we don't need multiple. We just need one, so we just deal with that here. So we create a window scene. And then we need to create our window, right? So let window is equal to UI window, and we need to specify, well, what window scene does this window live within, right? So it lives within this window scene we have over here. And then now we have our window. Now we can finally define our view controller, or instantiate our view controller. So we're gonna do let root vc is equal to view controller. And so this view controller is this view controller over here, okay? Cool. Finally, now we have our window scene, window and view controller. Now we put our view controller within the window. So window dot root view controller, and we set that equal to the root VC we made just now, okay? And so now we have our window set up. The window is within the window scene. Now we basically need to tell our project, right? Okay, I can make this bigger, sorry. Now we tell our project, right? I want the window I created to be the window you show me, right? So the way I do that is I do self.window is equal to window. So this self.window refers to this window over here, and this window refers to this window over here. Okay? Now we set that. One final thing to do is, okay, everything's all set, but I need to make sure that my project knows that, well, I want my window to display, right? Because sometimes you want to like have the windows like hide for a moment, and then when it loads, then it displays, right? Because it's like loading some assets or whatever. But in this project, we just want to display it straight away. So we make it key invisible, and that's actually it. So if I run it one more time, we should see a hopefully pink screen. There we go, right? So now we're actually displaying the view controller over here. Okay, first I'm gonna get rid of this pink background because it looks kind of gross, but and let's make it white. And let's start building our app, okay? So this is like, again, the reference thing that I like built before lecture. So a few things we see here, right? We have a label, we have a image over here. You can see my mouse, right? Okay, yeah, cool. You have a button here, which I can like click follow, unfollow, follow, unfollow, and then we have some text. So this is a UI text view. And then finally we have a text field down here, but I don't think we have time for that today. So let's just imagine we have the top 4 only right now, okay? So let's set that up. So I'm going to create a variable for my name label. That's a UI label. And then I'm going to create one for my profile image view. And I'm going to create one for my follow button. And then now I'm going to create a text view for the bio. So this is a text view. And then, okay, I'm going to comment this out because I'm not sure if we can get to this in this lecture today. But later, if we do get the time for it, we're going to have a text field. Yes, our text field, and that's for like this comment section over here, right? We click on it and we can start typing some stuff, okay? All right. So if I run this right now, so this one should disappear and nothing should appear, right? And the reason why nothing appears is because, sure, I have these like UI views here, but I didn't tell them where to go, right? So let's do that right now. So let's like first start with the name label, okay? Because that's up the top, and let's just work from top to bottom, right? You can work from bottom to top, like it doesn't matter, but just like work systematically, right? Because you want everything to be like anchored relation to each other. That's the whole point of using like the auto layout part here, okay? So let's start with the name label. So first, let's give it some like values, right? So I'm gonna first set the text on this label, and I'm gonna call it Jeff Bezos, right? Because we're building a profile for Jeff Bezos here. And then one very annoying thing I realized is that if you don't set the color for your label, it defaults to white, and that's very bad because you can't see it. So let's set it to just black because it's contrasting. And then finally, I'm going to set the font here just to make it bold. So .system font of size weight, and I'm going to just say 20 and then .bold. Okay. So let me just stop right here. Notice when I'm typing a lot of these things, right? I don't actually type out the entire expression. Like when I do dot, for example, right? So over here, let me delete this here. But if I just press the period button, you see how a lot of things just pop up here? That's like the very, very important thing to like remember is that you don't actually have to type a lot of the things. Just like if you have in mind and you know which one you want, you can just press the period, it'll autofill, and you just go select which one you want, right? So over here, I want the one that has the weight part, because I want to make it bold. Let's press enter, and it just appears, right? And then I can type in the size 20, and then I can press tab just to jump directly to this type, and I can keep typing, right? Period, bold, okay? So just keep that in mind. Like when you're typing things on your project, you don't have to type the entire thing, right? If you just press period, or you press control space, it'll do like autofill or autocomplete, and it just basically writes the code for you, kind of. So that's really good. All right. Now, one very important thing to remember when we're using auto layout is this property called translate auto resizing mask into constraint. This is a very, very gross name. And in short, basically what it does is it basically, you're telling your project, I don't want to use the constraints that you think I should use. I want you to use the constraints that I set, right? Because XCode, so your Swift projects or iOS apps, if you don't specify where they go, they just count them all to the top left corner, right? And so you don't want that, right? So you basically tell them, I don't want to use your like constraints. I want to use mine. So you just basically tell them false, like so don't use your constraints, and then you specify your constraints, okay? And then finally, you add your view, view.add subview, name label, okay? So a quick thing to remember, this view I'm talking about, that's this thing I'm implementing here, right? That's the view controller. And adding subview is like what I showed you before about like the view hierarchy, right? The view controller has a bunch of subviews, and they're like the UI views that I'm putting in or placing on the screen. So I add this name label to my view controller, and then it exists as like a subview of the view controller, okay? So I defined everything I wanted, right? Now let's tell it where to go, okay? So I could just like be like so I could just start typing the constraints here, right? And then like write a bunch of constraints, but I'm not actually going to do that. And it's really like important for your code to be clean, right? So right now, if I only had the label, it's actually fine, right? It's only probably like 10 lines of code. But when I start adding stuff about the profile image, the follow button, the bio text view, and stuff like that, you have all the properties, and then you have all the constraints, and your function can become very, very, very big. So I'm just going to factor this part out. I'm going to write a function here. So func. I'm going to call it set up constraints, right? And I'm just going to call it at the end here, set up constraints. So what this function is going to do is going to like, well, I'm going to write it, right? But I'm going to put in there all the constraints I have for my views. And then at the end of this part, I'm just going to call it. And so it like cleans up our code so that the in this function, we like set all the properties. And in this function, we set all the constraints, okay? So let's start with the constraints. So one important thing to remember is that in order to use your constraints, you actually need to activate them. So the syntax we do that is, the syntax that we use for that is ns_layout_constraint.activate. And inside there, we just put a list. So remember, this like a squared bracket is a list, right? In here, we put the list of our constraints. And so in here, we place the things that should be pretty familiar with, and that I showed in lecture, of like the view.constraint to, view.anchor.constraint to blah, right? So I'm going to do name label dot top anchor, because I want to constrain the top of it. Dot constraint, this is again here, right? Remember, I don't type the entire constraint word, I just type the first part, and then this autofill comes up, and I'm like, okay, I want this one, right? I press enter, right? And remember, since I'm constraining the name label with respect to the top of the phone, right? I want to use the safe area layout guide. So safe area. Huh? Wait, is it called something else? Wait, the safe area layout guide. Oh, yeah, sorry. View.safe area layout guide. My bad. And then you do dot top anchor. Okay. So this is the name label's top anchor. This is the view's top anchor, right? But I don't want them to stick on top of each other. So I'm just going to give it like some constraint, some offset, and I'm just going to say like 20, for example, right? And if I run that, it shouldn't be correct, but it should be almost correct, right? So I constrained the top of it to some like, with respect to the top of the phone, but I didn't tell like in terms of the horizontal positioning where for it to go, right? So I could specify the leading anchor and the trailing anchor and be like, I want the leading anchor to be like however many away from the left and the trailing to be however many away from the right. But when you want to center something, it's a lot easier just to do dot center x anchor dot constraint equal to the view dot center x anchor. And you don't need the constraint here, also the constant here, because it's like the exact same. You want them to overlap, right? So now if I run it, it should look like this, right? And that's great. Okay, cool. So we're done with the name. Now let's move on to the next part of the app, right? So right under the name, we have the image. So let's deal with the image here. So profile, image view. Yes. So image, actually, so before I even do that, I need to actually get the image, right? So let's just do Jeff Bezos. Let's get a good image of Jeff Bezos. I want something that looks like a square. Okay, this looks like a square. So let's just chuck it here. And then let's bring it. So where you put the image, you want to put it in. Okay, so I actually need to open it first. You want to go to assets, right? And in assets, here is where you put all your local images that you want to like display in your app. Okay? So I'm just going to give it a name, Jeff, drag, and drop it in here. So Jeff is now in my assets. Okay. And so now I can work with the image because the image is actually in my project now. So profile image view dot image is equal to UI image of, so I want to do the named here because I gave like the image like a name and I called it Jeff, right? And so now I set the image of my image view. Now I want to specify other properties, right? So I actually have an image for this. So sometimes when we're working with image views, there's a lot of properties you can set, right? You can do like scale to fill, aspect, top right, top left, like a bunch of other things you can do, right? So this is like a good image that I like. When I learned it, I felt it was really helpful to think about working with images. But these are like small quirks that you can like iron out when you're actually building a project, and you can just pick your favorite one. So for this demo here, I'm just going to pick scale aspect fill because it looks the best. Profile image view dot content mode equals to scale aspect fill. But again, right, like in your own project, you can pick the favorite one you want. And so this is like a good reference that you can use. Okay. Cool. So that's the scale aspect fill part. Now we want to specify more properties. So profile image view dot clips to bound equal to true. So that means like any part that kind of spills over, we just cut it off. And then we do profile image view dot layer dot corner radius equal to 5. And this just makes it look like pretty, because like a lot of like modern design is about like rounded edges and stuff. So let's just do that for it to look pretty. And finally, remember, right, we always need to tell our image views to use translate auto resizing mask into constraint, like that property, into false, right? Because we want to use our constraints. So remember to do that. Profile image view dot translate. And so if you type translate, usually it just autofill, so you press enter, right? Equal to false, and then we just add it to our view, right? Add view, profile image view. Okay, cool. So that's our setup for the image. Now let's tell it where to go, okay? So I could actually just like specify more in here, right? But again, for cleanliness and for modularity, let's just factor it out and put it here, right? And if you want to like be good and write documentation, you can be like constraints for name label, and then over here you do like constraints for image view, right? And you can just keep writing, like telling someone how to read your code, like what is this doing, right? Okay, so let's do this part. So where does the image going to go? It's going to go right underneath the name label, right? So how we do that, hopefully this is becoming more familiar, right? I want to get the top anchor of the profile image view, and I want to constrain it to the bottom of the name label. So name label dot bottom anchor, right? And again, right, so a very important trick, or like convenient trick, is when I'm filling out these like parts that are like grayed out, I can press tab and it just jumps to it. I can start typing, right? So what's the offset? Let's just say 20, right? It's just these are like constants that you can figure out and like play with. But for the demo purposes, I'm just going to use 20 here. Yes, so that gives me the top anchor. Now I also, I remember put a comma here because this is a list, right? And now I want to specify the center. So again, I'm going to use the center x anchor dot constraint equal to the name labels center anchor, right? Because I want them both to be center aligned. And I don't need to offset because I want them to be exactly aligned at the center. So if I run this and give it a moment because it needs to load an image. Oh, that is a big image. Yes, so what went wrong here, right? I forgot to tell it to be a certain size, right? So I set the top anchor and the middle anchor, but I didn't specify like the height and width, right? So let's give it a height and width. So profile image dot constraint, dot width anchor dot constraint equal to, and so over here, I don't actually want it to be like a size relative to some other like part of my screen. Like it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to give it like a fixed size. So I don't actually have to use this one. So what I can do is if I type constraint again, dot constraint, see I have a bunch of like different options to pick from. And these are all called constraint, right? The one I want here is equal to constant, the one over here, right? Where the constraint is set to be a specific constant value that I pass in. So equal to constant, I'm just going to use 200 here. And over here, I can also specify the height anchor. Oh, the height anchor to be also 200. So now I get a square Bezos, right? And so if I run it one more time, now Bezos should be a little smaller. There we go, right? You're looking very smug there. So yeah, so now Bezos is correctly sized. Okay, so this is actually the end of lecture. You can feel free to leave because most of the content that I wanted to cover is actually already covered. Now I'm just gonna like run through a few more examples of how to set things on the screen. But if you want to stay, I'm just gonna finish up the demo. And again, like if you leave, you can just like rewatch this because we're gonna upload this. Okay, cool. So we're done with the image view. Now let's move on to the second part. And I actually forgot what it looks like. So let me just have a quick look. Yes, so now we have a follow button. So this part is a little more involved because not only do we want to be able to like click on the button, right? Because that part's somewhat handled, but we also want to like store a state, right? Where the button is either clicked or like not clicked, right? Because if it's clicked, then I want to show the word following. If it's not clicked, I want to show the word follow, okay? So we're gonna implement that now. Please give me home. Okay, I'm just gonna put this. All right, so, oh, wrong one, view controller. And now I want to do the button. So I called my button follow button. And I'm going to set some properties on that. So first thing, I want to give it some text. So follow button. And so this is a little different from labels. Name labels, we do .text and we give it a string. With buttons, we want to do .setTitle. Set title. And we give it a title. Let's just call it follow. Oh, follow. And the state, we just use normal for now. Okay. And now we want to give it some color because, you know, a very weird default is if you don't give it a default color, it's just going to be white, so you can't see it. So follow button dot set title color. I'm going to give it system blue, and the state is also going to be normal. And then I also want to give it a border, so that's gonna make it look a lot better. So I'm gonna do follow button dot border width, right? And so notice how I didn't have to type layer. I just typed border width and it gave me .layer .border width. That's also another thing you can like another trick you can do is when I just type .border, right, it just autofills, right? Because it knows that like the layer is like not that important, but the border is the important part. So Xcode is smart and it kind of guesses that. You just type border and then you just press enter, and then it picks border width. Okay. We set the border width to 1, and then I want to set the border color, right? Same thing, equal to UI color dot system blue dot CG color. So this is actually another small quirk of the like when you're working with like these UI views. So there's normal properties like, so for example, this is a UI view, right? Because this is a UI label, and a UI label is a subclass of a UI view. The colors in a view, I can just access directly just by doing dot, right? Because it just autofills there. But when you're working with a property that you access from a layer, you need to use a CG color. So this is like a small detail you don't actually have to remember, but just like when you're working with it, sometimes the bugs come from here, right? So the way you get it, you just do UI color dot whatever color you want, right? And you do dot CG color. So that's how you would get that. Okay. And then do follow button dot corner radius as well equal to 10. And then finally you want to do the translate thing, right? This instead of false. Oh, false. Remember to do that as well. Okay, cool. So that should help us lay out the button. Now this is constraints for button, and I'm going to give it some space, and I want to paste my constraints here. Okay, so the button, what I want the button to be, hopefully this part is becoming more familiar, right? I want to constrain it equal to the bottom of my image. So I called it my profile image view dot bottom anchor, and the constant is going to say like 20 again, right? And I also want it to be centered. So I'm going to do follow button dot center x anchor dot constraint equal to, equal to profile image view dot center x anchor, and I don't want the constant here, right? Because I want it to be exactly centered. Yes, I need this. Okay, let's run it. Oop, okay, I forgot to say something. What did I forget? Oh, I didn't add it to the view, right? Remember, not only do you need to set this translate auto sizing remasking blah to false, you also need to add it to the view. Add subview, follow button, and now it should run. Cool, so we have a button, and so this is a quick fix. Like, so this is going to be a very common issue when you want to use buttons in, let's say, like the final hack challenge. There's actually no easy way around fixing it, right? Like, the way you fix it is you go into the layer property and you start like tweaking with the way the UI button works, and you do like define your own custom button. But if you don't want to do like an involved solution like that, a quick hack around it is you just add some space before and after your title. And if I run it one more time, it looks a lot more normal. Like that, okay? This is a quick hack. Okay, now, so the final part, all I'm going to show at the end of, for the rest of this lecture, is how we set the state for this button, right? Because like the text view down there is exactly the same, so I'm not going to go through that. But right now, I click on the button, nothing happens, right? It's just the same as like the image or like the label, nothing's really happening. So let's do that, right? So a button needs what we call a target. So when I click on the button, Swift is going to call whatever function I pass in, okay? So I'm going to write a function for that, okay? So the function, I'm going to call it follow button tapped, right? And it takes in nothing. And I need to give this a decorator, objective C. Oops, sorry. So you don't have to worry too much about what this decorator is, but there's some parts of like your of Swift where it still can't fully handle everything by itself. So we need to use like the old functions, or like sorry, the old syntax of like Objective C to basically help us do a lot of things that we want to do. And this is one of those cases where we want to use an Objective C function. So we use that decorator here, and we're going to pass this function in later as like the target. So when I click on this button, it's going to call this function. Okay, cool. So what do we want to do? We want to toggle the state of the button, but I haven't set the state, so let's set the state. So the way we do this is just we can define a variable var is following, and initially when I don't do anything, or like when I just launch my app, it shouldn't be following. So I'm going to set it to false. And so now when I click the button, I want to change the state of following. So I want to do if not is following, right? So if the person is not following, then I want to follow. Else, I want to unfollow, right? Set. Okay, so when I want to follow, then I want to set the is following state equal to true, because I'm now following. And over here is where I would set the state of the button, because if I click on it, right, I want it to basically show that I'm following after I click on it. So the way I do that is I access the button, I do follow button, and I set the title to something else. I'm going to call it following, and let's do this, right? We are following. Oh, if you want to know, so I did control command space, and that toggles the emoji thing, okay? That's irrelevant. And we do like normal here. So most of the time you're going to be using normal. But if you're curious about like what more there is, you can read up about that. You just type in UI button and look at the Apple documentation for that. Okay, 1 more 2 minutes. Yeah. Yes, so I'm going to set the title for that. Otherwise, I want to set is following. Oops, sorry. Is following to false, and I set the title back to what it initially was, right? So I set it back to follow. Okay, so this should be the very, very end. Now, if I run this, it's builded, and if this works, I click on it. It doesn't work. Okay, what did I do? So let's see. Yes. No, I'm saying for. Oh yeah, so I know what I didn't do. So I forgot to add the target, right? So I set up this function, that's all great, but I haven't added a target, and this should be the last thing we need to do. So before I add the view to the sub view, I want to add the target of the button. So dot, what was it called? Yeah, it's dot set target. No, okay. Add target. And so the target here is itself, because I want the button to basically, like when I click on it, who needs to change, right? When I click on the button here, the button needs to change, right? So itself. And then the action is basically here's where I would pass in the function. So hashtag selector. And this is where we pass in the function. So follow button, what did I call it? Oh, follow button tapped, right? And now the event. So this is, you can get very fancy with this, right? You can do like dragged, double tapped, triple tapped, or whatever. But over here, I just wanted to tap once. So I do dot touch up inside. That basically means if I click the button inside the button, then I want to call this function. Now, it should work. And I'll click on that. It changes to following. Okay, and if I click on it again, it goes back to follow. Okay, click, 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 click. Okay, so that's the end of the lecture. Notice how I didn't do like the text on the bottom, but this is very similar to what I did just now, right? You define the properties, you give it some values, you set the constraints, right? So hopefully this wasn't too fast because this week we only had one lecture, so we had to cram a lot of content into this lecture. But like always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to like post on Ed, and hopefully this all made sense. Okay.